Okie dokie.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is going to be the last lesson in level 2 before we do the test. I was going to teach today the Merkaba level 2 or Merkaba version 2.0, whatever you want to call it. But I was given very clear instructions that I had not taught certain aspects clearly enough, and there were certain other things that needed to be reiterated. So that's what we're going to do today, is talk about a lot of misunderstood things about the Merkaba. So I'm just wondering, have you guys been doing your Merkaba meditations?
Not since I got back. No, I haven't.
You cut out there.
Oh, sorry. I said not since I got back.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's all right. I recommend that you do this daily, if not more often. Just ask your higher self how often you should do this meditation. But until your Merkaba is permanent, I recommend everybody does this meditation daily. And since it's only a 5-minute meditation, once you learn it really well, you can actually just do it at work if you want on your break, or while you're sitting on the toilet at work, whatever suits you. But yeah, it's just a really quick meditation, but it's going to definitely change your life. So yeah, so we're going to go over the Merkaba, the first version of the Merkaba. If you are new to this and you didn't take those lessons, then I recommend you look back on the YouTube channel for those lessons. I believe it was in two particular lessons, and you can get that in more detail. So we're just going to move on from there. Now, I'd like to talk about the last three breaths, which is breath 15, 16, and 17. Now, in breath 15, you are, for the first time, spinning your Merkaba. So, well, okay, I should say you're spinning your star tetrahedrons. So you have two star tetrahedrons that are spinning in opposite directions, and then you have one that is stationary. Okay, and that spinning is going to create the Merkaba, which is actually a field of energy. So now, when you're spinning your tetrahedrons, you're going to spin them in opposite directions at 1/3 the speed of light. And we're going to talk about why that is. Now, by the way, when Drunvalo came up with this meditation, he claims that there were two angels that brought this to his attention. Okay. So we're just going to go with that's how he got this idea. When he came up with this, he didn't know any of this scientific stuff. Okay. So this just um, further proved or further verified that the Merkaba was accurate. All right. 1/3 the speed of light is the speed of an electron when it's going astray in a particle accelerator. So, someone who worked at Cornell was a particle beam accelerator operator, and he took the Merkaba training, and he actually told Maureen St. Germain this information, that when they have two particles colliding, you might have a stray electron that kind of veers off course, and that will be spinning off haphazardly at 1/3 the speed of light. So it's basically the speed of beginning um, in this dimension, in the third dimension. All right. Then in breath 16, we are taking it to a level that is in tune with our DNA. So our DNA is 31, or sorry, 34 angstroms to 21 angstroms when you look at the height and the width of the spiral, okay? And that is by design, again, to be with the Fibonacci sequence, or the phi ratio, if you will, the golden mean, okay? And that is, of course, what we are spinning our tetrahedrons at, okay? So you have one star tetrahedron that's going 34 spins to the left, 21 to the right, which is the same as our DNA ratio, which is the same as the phi ratio, okay? So that is the source code for the third dimension, if you recall. And if you would like more information on that, that is actually the very first lesson that we did. So level 1, lesson 1, we talked about the source code being the phi ratio, or the golden mean, for the third dimension. So we're taking, in essence, we're taking the third dimension and our DNA and how we are, and we're transforming it into this vehicle that will take us outside of this dimension, if you will. Now, in breath 17, which is the final breath that I taught, you are taking everything to 9/10 the speed of light, which is the speed of a healthy electron. So that is the speed that an electron will spin around the nucleus of an atom. That is the essence of matter. That is the essence of physical beingness in this dimension. It is the source. It's the atom. Yes, okay, there's nanoparticles, and those are also part of matter, but the main crux of how things are created is with the atom. So understanding how that works is crucial to understanding the Merkaba and the third dimension, how we get out of that third dimension, all right? So I'm just kind of explaining that further so that everyone understands where we're going with this. Okay, now there is the 18th breath. The 18th breath is taught by your higher self. And we went over higher self training. As soon as we did breath 14, that's where you're going to find a lot of the higher self training. And then after that, we talked about the higher self quite a bit. So for more information on that, I would go to the lessons that are after the Merkaba lessons for more information on the higher self, okay? So the higher self will teach you the 18th breath, but it is kind of elusive if you are really wanting it and you are kind of chasing it. It'll be kind of hidden from you. And when you forget about all of that and you just do your ascension work, there it is. It's just right in front of you. So it's something that'll just come to you, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. Trying to get the 18th breath, if you're not ready, it won't come to you. All right. So that being said, we're going to focus on things like the Mandela effect and creating reality for a higher purpose. Not that, getting more money is not important. We all need money. We need money to survive and to buy things for ourselves, just so that we have more comfortable existence as well. And that's not selfish. It's not wrong. And don't feel bad if you just want something and it's just a material possession. You just want it. You can use this training to get things, to get what you want. And that's not bad. That is not negative. That is not selfish. However, I would hope that most of you also have higher goals in mind. Having integrity, honesty, bettering humanity, elevating ourselves from a society that just focuses on going to work and coming home and watching TV and surviving, versus having a society where we value each other and we live for a higher purpose in mind, is hopefully a goal that all of you have. So let's talk about the Mandela effect. Now, has anyone heard of this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Well, the Mandela effect is quite interesting. There are some people who remember one reality, and there are many other people who remember a different reality. And when you look at the records of what we have in our databases, okay, it'll show that, you know, this logo has always been this way, but other people remember it differently. And there's even photographs and video evidence of the logo being different. And so people will say, well, that's, you know, residual proof. It's residue from this other reality or other dimension, or nobody really knows how to explain this with words. Well, I'm going to offer something different, and I'm sure other people have offered this as a possible reason, but it has to do with our creative power that we've been talking about this whole time in the Be Your Own Genie training, okay? We all have the power to create our own reality, and we are co-creating reality with God right now as we speak. If you are aware that you can create reality, then you are going to be hopefully consciously creating your reality to what you want and not what you don't want. If you are not aware, then you're probably just going through life, and life is sort of just happening to you. And you don't really know that there's any way to change it. So you may even, for one time or another, play the victim card and just say, well, you know, the government changed the tax laws and then that affected my business. So then that's why my business went under. Or, oh, well, you know, my parents mistreated me when I was a baby, and, you know, I grew up all messed up in the head, and that's why I can't manage to get my life back together. So you might, if you don't realize that you're affecting reality right now, you might go through life as a victim, or life might just happen to you because some of your thoughts are positive and some of your thoughts are negative. So they tend to even out and you get kind of an average life. But when you know these techniques, hopefully you will put them into practice and good things are going to be happening to you. And the more grateful you are and the more you count your blessings, the more blessings you will find that come to you. Now, what does this have to do with the Mandela effect? Well, we are all changing reality. And more people are learning that they are changing reality with the power of their minds. And this, I believe, is acting on a giant scale. The more people that learn this technique, the more people are consciously changing reality. And what we are finding is that there was a reality that was not so positive for our future. And then somehow this reality got changed, and then it got changed again, and then it got changed again, to the point where we were going to be in self-destruction mode. We were going to destroy ourselves and destroy our planet. And now the future appears to be that we will not. That is the difference that this training makes. At least that's my theory. Um, when you have this kind of understanding that you affect the future, your reality, what kind of reality are you going to choose for yourself? Yes, of course, you know, you're going to pick more money, probably, a nicer house, a car that runs, okay, car that actually starts in the winter. You know, you're going to choose good things for yourself and for your family. But after that, let's just assume that you're going to have this amazing, abundant life. After that, what would you choose to do with this awesome power that you just learned that you have had all along? Well, how about let's end world hunger? Let's end human trafficking and sex slavery and things like that. How about we end poverty globally? How about we, you know, make it so that we can go to other planets and explore the stars? Really, the sky's the limit. And I don't mean that literally. We can travel beyond our planet. So why don't we do it? Let's make that into our future, our near future, not like, you know, in hundreds and hundreds of years. Let's make that our future in a couple decades. When we learn the Merkaba, what you're going to find is you are going to be thinking fifth dimensionally. Now, why are we thinking fifth dimensionally, not fourth dimensionally? Well, let's talk about the dimensions. Okay. So as a Merkaba aficionado, you're going to be traveling through the dimensions. Well, zero dimensions is a void. It's a vacuum. So it is, in essence, nothingness. I believe that when God created the universe, created planet Earth, it was zero dimensions. So there was just a big void, okay? It was complete darkness. Then the first dimension is a line. So whenever you're thinking of dimensions, just think of like a photograph or something. A photograph, you can have like a 4x6, which is 4 inches by 6 inches, and that is the dimensions. Okay, so it's not some mysterious word. It is actually just a word that means that you can measure the distance of it. You can measure a facet of it. Okay, so when you have the first dimension, you're talking about a line. Now, this line is obviously not in our reality because it would have absolutely no height to it. This line would have no width to it. It would literally be a line that is only however long the line is, and that's it. It would not have any height or any width. It is one dimension. So the line could be 1 foot long, it could be 1 mile long, but it is still a line nonetheless. Then the second dimension technically also does not exist in the physical reality here. Okay, the only thing that I could really say that would be 100% accurate for 2-dimension would be cyberspace. So when you go to cyberspace, you look at your Facebook page. Okay, well, your Facebook page is technically 2 dimensions only because there is absolutely no thickness to that page. It's not a literal page. It just exists in cyberspace. So it doesn't technically exist here in the here and now. So that has 2 dimensions. It has length and it has width. The third dimension, you know, obviously we are 3-dimensional when we look at our bodies. We have height, length, and width. I think everybody understands that. Pretty much every concrete current reality, that's 3-dimensional. Even paper. Paper has a very thin height but it is still three-dimensional. So now the fourth dimension, well, what exactly is the fourth dimension? Well, I want you to think about emotions and thoughts, because thoughts exist, emotions exist, and they clearly do affect reality. We've already seen that. We've been learning about how to do that. So they obviously exist. So it's not zero dimensions. So how many dimensions does, for example, hatred have? And we have learned that hatred becomes tangible in the fourth dimension. So it is not tangible in the third dimension. You can't have a cup of hatred, literally, in this dimension, but you can in the fourth. And you can measure it, you can analyze it, just like you would a cup of water. Or, you could test the air that you breathe. So you could actually test hatred. In the fourth dimension, what also exists is the suicide entity, depression, and all of those lower, quote unquote, negative emotions. I don't like using that word negative emotions because that is actually very third dimensional to talk like that. But that's what we're dealing with in the fourth dimension. Another thing that you're dealing with is fairies, elves, things that sound kind of silly. Dragons, unicorns, all of those creatures exist in the fourth dimension, but not here in the third. That's why some people say, oh, do you have the sight? And what they mean is, can you see fairies? Can you see gnomes? If you can't, don't worry about it. It's not really a big deal. But there is a way for you to learn how to see these beings, okay? But I will warn you that if you're in the fourth dimension, you'll begin to see these creatures. However, don't get caught up in the fourth dimension. Now, you'll recall me talking about the phi ratio. Okay, so the phi ratio, if you recall the Fibonacci sequence, you have two numbers communicating back and forth. It's a relationship. And the phi ratio never ends. It is 1.618. But then there is a whole list of numbers that come after that, and it never quits. You can do it till, the millionth decimal point, and you will still not find the end of that number. It continues forever. That is the third dimension, source code. But you know what the source code for the fourth dimension is? It's 2. It's a whole number. Now, why is that? Well, if you take the square root of the dimension number, that is what you're dealing with, okay? So you have the square root of 3 for the third dimension. I realize that is not the phi ratio, but it actually is also an irrational number, okay? So it continues on forever. But then when you take 4 and you take the square root of 4, you end up with 2. It's a whole number. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, when you have an irrational number, it is like a relationship. It is forever ebbing and flowing back and forth, and the number is continual. But when you have a whole number like that, there is no relationship at all. It doesn't change. And in fact, the creatures that launch from the fourth dimension, like, say, a fairy or an elf, they, number one, do not have free will. They are not able to lie. They are not able to pick the not God choice, if that makes any sense. So you have the God choice, and then you have the not God choice. And we as human beings are able to choose. Now, some people would call the not God choice a sin, okay? I don't really care what you call it, but it is a choice that you are allowed to make in this third dimension. Meaning we are allowed to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. But imagine if you had someone that was not able to do that. They just always chose the God choice. Well, okay, that'd be cool, but they probably wouldn't learn very much, would they? They probably wouldn't change and grow like we do. And that's the reality of it, is that a fairy, an elf, a gnome, they have a program, and that program is running. And that's really all they are doing. They have a program and they're running that program. And that's what they do. They don't have an ebbing, a flowing, a changingness to their being. They don't learn, they don't grow, they don't change. So as a result, if you stay in the fourth dimension too long, you can tend to get wrapped up in all of that a little bit too much. When you're in 4D, you may feel a little bit drunk, or you might feel like it's a dream, like you're in a dream. And there's nothing wrong with being in the fourth dimension, but I would suggest that you go through it and then you go to the fifth dimension. Okay, so the fifth dimension. Now, what is all of that about? Well, when you get to the fifth dimension, you will most likely feel like you are in love. It's a very nice place to be, and it is sort of like being in heaven, or what our idea of heaven is all about. So that's really where we want to go, because if you take the square root of 5, that also is an irrational number. And that is a place where we are still able to grow and experience new understandings. However, this is the place where we begin to only choose the God choice. Another thing that we do in the fifth dimension is we use words that are not dualistic, okay? Does anybody understand what dualism is?
Not exactly.
Sorry, my button wasn't working there. Okay. So dualism is that there is, what to do. Okay. She says, is this in my highest and best good? Or is this in the highest and best good for all involved? Notice the fifth dimensional language that she uses. So the answer that she got was that she should leave immediately after the end of her training program where she was training. She was the teacher, okay? She was supposed to leave immediately after that class on September 10th, 2001. So she just left the city and she went to her next destination. Originally, she had wanted to go and do some exploring in the city the following day. Well, what was the following day? September 11th, 2001, okay? So remember, her higher self instructed her that it was in her highest and best good to leave on a flight September 10th, so the evening of September 10th, and go to her next destination. Well, if she had not followed that instruction, she probably would have been stranded in the city. And she would have not made it to her next destination on time to teach that course. Okay. So she followed this instruction, but she did so without any fear because she knew that when you're following what your higher self is telling you to do, you're going to be following advice that is of a greater vantage point. It's like having somebody in a helicopter looking over the whole entire topography of where you're going on a trip so that they can tell you if there's any problems that's going to arise in the future. So they could tell you if the bridge is out up ahead, they can tell you if the road is flooded, they could tell you all kinds of things. Is there traffic that's not going to allow you to go through? Having somebody in a helicopter showing you the way when you're driving through traffic would be really cool. And that's what it's like to have your higher self instruct you on what to do. Now, your higher self is not your boss. It is not your parent instructing you to do this or else you're grounded. Okay? No, you can choose not to follow your higher self. But the joke is that you will be sorry. So yeah, you can definitely choose to say no to your higher self and not follow the instruction, but you'll be sorry. And there's a few examples of that that I'll get to in a minute. But another thing about no fear is Maureen St. Germain was traveling on a train in New York, okay, a subway. And the doors opened at a stop, and it was late at night. So there weren't that many people on the train. Well, there were a couple men and 3 or 4 females. And most of them got out except for one man. And then the doors closed, and it was just Maureen St. Germain and this very large man that were left in the car. Well, as soon as the doors closed, immediately this man came over to her and started being very overbearing and demanding that she give him money. Well, she said, no. And he said, give me some money. She said, no, I don't do that. And then actually she was in need of a cell phone, and she didn't have a cell phone at that time. This was quite a few years ago. And she thought, well, maybe, if he has a cell phone, I would pay him to use his cell phone for one call. So she asked him, do you have a cell phone? And he said, no. She said, well, if you don't have a cell phone, I'm not giving you any money. Of course, the guy was probably very confused, like, what are you talking about? What does that have to do with anything? So he was probably quite confused, but he still demanded that she give him money. And she said, look, I just got off a plane, and I mean no disrespect, but I'm having trouble hearing you because of the airplane in my ears. Okay, so are you asking me something different than what you just asked me a few seconds ago? And he was confused again, and he said, no, just give me some money. She said, sorry, I don't do that. Well, then at that point, the train was at the next station, and the doors opened, and she got out. So it was quite interesting the way that she handled it. She just kind of played dumb, or, played confused lady to just stall him. But she was never afraid, because she always follows her higher self and what her higher self is instructing her to do. He might have been a bully and a panhandler, but he really wasn't going to really do any harm to her. So he was just gonna, try to intimidate her, and it didn't work. So that's what it's all about when it comes to being fearless, is if you are on the path of good, if you are following your bliss, you are following your gut instinct and your higher self, that is the course of action that you need to take. And it is irrelevant what it appears to be. What matters is what will be. And usually what will be is going to be off your radar screen. So the things that you think are going to happen, it's probably not going to happen that way. The Lord works in mysterious ways, right? So it's probably not going to happen the way that you want it to or think that it should, but it will happen in the best way if you allow this to work in your favor. So moving into the fifth dimension and becoming a fifth dimensional being is the goal here. It's not going to the sixth dimension and the seventh dimension and on up, okay? We're not going to win the race by speeding towards the highest dimensional possible, okay? It's not a competition, and you don't have to get to the 12th dimension or beyond to be ascended, okay? This is not something that is a competition, all right? So becoming fifth dimensional is understanding that you are always protected no matter what, and you are always in a place of being at cause. And we talked about being at cause versus being at effect last time and the last lesson, which is very telling. Most people go through life at effect. They allow life to happen to them, and they will even make excuses of why they cannot succeed. They will say, oh, well, you know, white privilege is stopping me from succeeding because I am a person of color. Or, oh, well, everybody speaks English and I don't speak English very well, so that's why I'm not succeeding. Or, you know, I'm a woman and everybody in this company is a man and they're looking down on me like I can't do it, and that's why I'm not succeeding. Well, all of those things are real, by the way. There really is racism. There really is white privilege. There really is all of that. But it's not stopping you from succeeding. Why? Well, because you are creating a signal with your mind that is going all throughout the universe, and it is being picked up by other people's brains, and it is also affecting all of the physical matter in the universe. The key is, how do you feel? Do you feel good now? If you feel good, that is a sign that that is where you should be, that you are following your bliss. And if you believe in God and you like to pray, you can pray on it and just ask God, you know, is this the way that I'm supposed to go? You know, can you show me the right way to go? And you will be shown the right way, whether you believe in God or not, by the way, okay? You don't have to believe in God to be shown the right way. So as I was saying, if you're becoming a fifth dimensional being, you are going to change your perspective on all of reality. Instead of being in survival mode all the time, like, oh, I need money. Oh, I need food. Oh, the rent is due. Oh, my clothes are all getting threadbare and I need new clothes. Where am I going to get the money for that? Instead of being focused on that, you will probably change your focus to more, for lack of a better term, more enlightened thoughts, okay? And it's going to change history. It really will change history. And I think that is why we are now experiencing the Mandela effect, is because so many people are changing history to a more positive outcome that it is literally changing our reality, so that some people remember reality as having happened one way and it actually happened a different way, okay? Understand that there might be several versions of reality that are coexisting at the same time, and you are just changing tracks. It is actually possible for two things to exist at one time, or even more than two, okay? So if somebody does not remember history the way that you remember history, that's okay. I mean, you could just be misremembering. That does happen. But more often than not, in this new reality that we're living in, it's probably just their version of reality. That's what they remember. When you are becoming fifth dimensional, it's the first level of non-polarity or non-duality. Okay. So I think I talked about it already, where we look at things as being good or bad here in the third dimension. That kind of language really doesn't exist in the fifth dimension. Things are actually more simple as well. Your heart is going to open up as well to become more fifth dimensional. You will become more aware of what you are eating, drinking, even smoking. There might be substances that you have used or abused in the past, and you will not really be able to do that anymore. You'll find that your higher self may give you instruction that those things are not to your highest purpose. So you'll stop using or abusing those substances. Also, you're not going to be looking at people as short or tall, fat or thin, good looking or ugly, male or female. You're going to be looking at people as the spiritual beings that they are, instead of, oh, this person fits this label. I'm just going to put this label on this person, and they are in that group, and they must adhere to all of the tenets of that group. No, I mean, every person is unique and different, and you'll begin to see that as well. It is imperative that we work through our issues of shame in order to ascend to the fifth dimension, and our issues of anger and rage. So if you find that you momentarily will have just these irrational bouts of rage, or perhaps even you feel shame, there are some techniques to get rid of that. I would recommend getting the oils that I happen to sell called Aromandelas. And the Aromandelas are excellent. All of them are. You put them in your hand. So you put like 2-3 drops in your hand, and you put your hands together and just rub for a couple seconds to get the oil on your hand in a thin layer. And then you cup your hands together and you bring them to your nose, not touching your nose, but almost to your nose. And you inhale slowly. And then you kind of waft your hands towards your face. When you inhale this oil, and they're essential oils, by the way, they're very high quality, it will help you through certain emotional barriers. So, for example, one particular oil would be the Merkaba oil. So it's actually called Merkaba. And this is, or I think it's called Merkaba Mystique. Sorry, Merkaba Mystique is the name of this Aromandela. And it will get rid, or help you get rid of, the rage that is in your emotional body, and also shame. Okay, and this will help you ascend in your Merkaba practice. Okay, just think of yourself as a snake that's shedding its skin. So you're molting that skin off, and you're just leaving that behind. So just think of it, all the crap that you have in your life, in your emotional body, and you're just going to molt that off and leave it behind, and you're going to be this new person, and you're growing every time. You're just going to be this awesome person that goes through. And if you think of your pain in the past traumas that you've had, past experiences that were not so positive, and just think about those. try to retell that story. Is there a way that you can retell that story in a different way? Like, do you have to break down and cry when you tell your story of trauma, your story of woe? Do you have to get upset or angry when you retell that story? If you could tell that story without any outward negative emotion, your face doesn't get red, you don't tear up, could you? Is there a way for you to work past those emotions so that it is not in your emotional body anymore? Yes, absolutely. So just imagine yourself clearing through all of that crud of your past emotion, of your past trauma and pain. It is definitely possible to do that. And in fact, getting rid of that negative energy in your emotional body will make manifestation way easier and faster, because that is part of your signal. So if you've been traumatized, like maybe you were beaten as a kid or you were molested as a kid, you're going to carry that with you. If you don't deal with that, it is still part of you, and it is part of your signal that you are sending out to the universe. So if you have your chief aim and you're beaming that out, you're going to have interference, because that trauma is also going to be part of your signal. How do you work through that? Well, ask your higher self how to do that properly. Ask for your Merkaba to heal that, because it actually will over time. And imagine yourself molting just like a snake molts its skin. Just picture that happening. When you do your Merkaba practice as well, there's a point where you are imagining all of the negativity coalescing in the center of your tetrahedron, and then you're shooting it out the bottom. Okay, at that point, you can also imagine all of that trauma in your past is leaving your body. Okay, so one last thing, because I was going to go over the higher dimensions, not just the fifth, but the sixth and so on. But I don't think I'm going to be doing that today. Just something else is, sorry, I was gonna say something and then I got told not to say it. You are operating from your ego right now, or at least you were before the Merkaba training. Your ego has a certain purpose, but sometimes your ego can get in the way, okay? It could get in the way of what God's purpose is for your life. Your ego can also get in the way if you've had past trauma and past abuse, because the goal of your ego at that point, when you were experiencing the trauma, is how do we survive even though we've just been traumatized? And you may work up barriers. It could be physical barriers, like you could gain a lot of weight to deal with your trauma, or it could also be barriers that are emotional. You may build up walls where you do not trust people. You may build up walls where you don't communicate with people unless you really know them. You may have all kinds of other emotional issues that when you get your Merkaba fully functioning and running, you will deal with that. And you will find that the Merkaba kind of forces you to deal with that. It may be violent in your life, okay? So program your Merkaba so that you can have this emotional stuff dealt with as imperceptibly as possible while you are sleeping, so that it is not so hard on you during the day when you're physically aware of what's going on. and physically and emotionally aware of what's going on. Okay. So when you're removing your mask, if you will, you're going to be exposing the real you. And your ego might object. Okay. Your ego might say, hey, wait a minute. What are you doing? You're exposing yourself and you're allowing yourself to be hurt again. And the thing is that when you were a toddler, your parents probably put you in a playpen once in a while to keep you safe. You know, then you can't crawl around and electrocute yourself in the outlets. You can't crawl around and find a knife or a pair of scissors and hurt yourself. But do you need a playpen right now as an adult? Of course not. Okay. There are things that your ego has put in place is sort of like a mental or an emotional playpen around you. You don't need that anymore. It doesn't serve you anymore. There was a time when it did, but now it doesn't. So that is going to come off and leave you exposed. And you may feel your ego getting antsy. So just ask your higher self to help you deal with that. And you may even want to program your Merkaba to allow you to deal with that as imperceptibly as possible while you are sleeping. Now, is there any questions or comments or observations before the next class?
None from me. Can you hear me?
Okay, I guess there are no. I think we'll wrap that up today. I was going to do a lot of instructing on the higher dimensions, but it doesn't look like we have time. So we'll do that next time.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Agla. How are you doing?